Welcome, Pastor, as he comes to bring the word today.
Wow, good morning to you. Today we're going to talk about what do you want for Christmas? What do you want for Christmas? But before we do that, I've got a few other things to take care of. I'm going to read to you a few verses out of Matthew chapter 2, beginning at verse 9. Now this is when the wise men had followed the star. They came and they went to King Herod, because if the new king is born, you're going to look for him in the palace. So they went to King Herod and they told him about this new king that was born. And he tells them to go find this baby and come back and tell him so he can go worship him. And when they heard the king, they departed, and the star, which they saw in the east, went before them, till it came and stood over where the young child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with exceeding great joy. And when they came into the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother. They fell down and worshipped him, and opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. There are two or three real extremes when it comes to Christmas. There are those that refuse to celebrate Christmas. No trees, no gifts, no lights. They say, well, it's been so commercialized. Well, I agree. Christmas has been commercialized to the point of being ridiculous. I mean, when Walmart's putting up Christmas trees for sale in August, I hate to even mention the name. Now, the other extreme is that the people that think nothing about going into debt to buy things that people don't want, don't need, and wish they didn't have, and they're going to go trade it in for something else as soon as your back's turned. And then there's another group. They put up trees and lights all over the house and lights all over the yard to celebrate the birth of someone they do not even know. But that's not the message today. I want to give you some facts before we get to the message about Christmas that have been distorted. First of all, let me say Jesus was not born on December 25th. I won't tell you how all that come about when Constantine was trying to make Christianity the religion of the Roman Empire in 327 AD, I think it was. I'm not going to go into that. Jesus was not born December 25th. The reason I know that is because John the Baptist, now he was 6 months older than Jesus. We know that John was born in April because his father was a priest in the temple, and he was on duty for a holy day, and we know that that holy day was April. That's when John the Baptist was born. And so if he was born in April, that means Jesus was born May, June, July, August, September, October. Say, well, Mack, what difference does it make? Well, I'll tell you that in a few minutes. Another thing is, when the wise men came to see Jesus, he was not a babe in a manger. Verse 11 says, when they came to the house, they saw the young child with Mary, his mother. He was not in a manger. He was in a house. He was not in Bethlehem. He was in Nazareth. And the wise men found the baby in Nazareth, not in a manger. He was in a house. And all these manger scenes with the wise men there presenting gifts in a stable, not true. Not true. Now, the Bible does not say that the star led them to Bethlehem. It does not say the star led them to Nazareth. The Bible says the star led them to where the young child was. That's in verse 9. Now, I know you're wondering, what is all this about? How many wise men were there? We don't have a clue how many there were. There might have been 300. Well, Mack, I know there was 3 because I got a Christmas card that had 3 wise men in a stable with the shepherd. No. He was not a baby in a manger. When they found him, he was about 2 to 3 years old. He was in a house, and they came and they opened their treasure to him. Now, wise men did not travel alone. 3 wise men, there were thieves everywhere, 3 wise men with a lot of wealth. They wouldn't have made it 2 miles out of town till they would have been robbed and probably killed. They didn't have motels on every other corner. They didn't have restaurants. When they traveled with all of their family, all of their servants, all of their slaves, all of their herds, all of their flocks, with their tents. And they didn't travel 300 or 400 miles a day. They was lucky to get 5 or 10 miles a day. It took them a long time, and there were caravans of them. They didn't travel alone. And when they saw the star, they knew the baby was born, and it took them a long time to get there. If you don't hear anything else I say today, at least hear this. Give God something He can bless. They opened their treasure. Now, I love this statement, and I see it quite often. Wise men still seek Jesus. I believe that's true. They worshiped Him, and they opened their treasure and presented Him with gifts. Now, isn't it strange? We give everybody gifts on Jesus' birthday but Jesus. How would you like to have a birthday party to celebrate your birthday and everybody comes in and gives everybody else gifts and you're the only one who don't get one? That would not be nice, would it? So what treasure does God want from you? Remember, God opened His treasure and gave us His Son. When God opened His treasure, He gave us His heart. When He gave His Son, God put a face on Himself. He let us know what He was like. And it says, Luke 2:13 says, suddenly, when Jesus was born, suddenly, there was a multitude of heavenly hosts praising God, saying, glory to God in the highest, and on earth, peace and goodwill toward men. God said, when His Son came, I'm giving you my Son. If you will accept Him, I'm not mad at you anymore. The war is over. Peace. I'm declaring a one-sided peace. It's called unilateral peace. God declared unilateral peace. He said, I give you peace. I have peace towards all men. No wonder when the wise men came that they opened their treasure and presented Him with gifts. So what gift does God want from you? Jesus said, where your treasure is, there will be your heart also. What treasure does He want? He wants you to give Him your heart. He gave you His heart. Now He said, if you will give me your heart, that's where your treasure is. How many have been asked, what do you want for Christmas? Every year, same question. What do you want for Christmas? And my kids say, well, Dad, it's so hard to buy for. I'm not hard to buy for. Just don't buy me anything. Solve that problem. They said, well, Dad, if he wants something, he just goes and gets it. So what are we going to buy him? I don't need a tie. But I have been asked, and we have all been asked, what do you want for Christmas? And I really tried to put some thought into it. If I could have anything that I wanted, I think I would ask for three things. Three things that I think I would like to have. Number one, I would like to have grace enough to be sweet to all people under all conditions. Now, I'm going to confess I have been a miserable failure at that, because it's not always easy to be sweet and optimistic and encouraging to all people under all conditions. There are some people that's just not very lovable. I am not Will Rogers. Will Rogers said he never met a man he didn't like. Well, Will Rogers never met some of the people I've met. There's just some people I don't care about being around. I'm sorry. I've been a miserable failure. That's why I need grace to be sweet. Let me tell you a story. Basically, this sermon is based around three different stories. A young father pushing a buggy, and he seemed to be totally undisturbed by the screams coming from the buggy. He was talking. He said, easy, Albert. Everything's going to be all right, Albert. Don't worry, Albert. Stay calm. Control yourself. More screams, more violent screams. Now, Albert. Everything's going to be all right. And an elderly lady, don't call them old, elderly, passing by, she said, young man, I want to congratulate you. You know just exactly how to talk to a baby. You talk so calmly, so gently. She patted the baby on the head and said, it'll be all right, Albert. And the father said, no, that's Harold. I'm Albert. A man once complained to Benjamin Franklin that the Constitution of the United States was a joke. Where's all the happiness it's supposed to guarantee us? Franklin smiled and said, all the Constitution guarantees, my friend, is the pursuit of happiness. You have to catch up to it yourself. It's not always easy to be sweet to all people under all conditions. How many have found that to be true? Then I am in the right place. I don't know that I have to be or that I'm required to be sweet to all people under all conditions. How many of you know I can be a little testy? Put your hand down. What is this? You always put your hands up at the wrong time. I don't know that I have to be sweet to all people under all conditions, but I do know this. My ministry will be a success if my people know that I love them. So anyway, number one, I think I would ask for grace to be sweet to all people under all conditions. And I have not arrived there yet. Number two, I'd like to have patience to all people at all times. Now, most of you that know me very well know that patience is not one of my better virtues. You know, churches don't just happen. Somebody has to build them. Most of my failures with people, with churches, with family, most of my failures have been because of lack of patience. Let me tell you another story. An old man had bought a calf from his neighbor. His name was Perkins. And he decided he would lead the calf home with a rope. So to be sure that the calf didn't get away from him, he tied the rope around his waist. Somewhere along the way, the calf got scared, took off running, and it dragged the old gentleman through brush piles, fences, briar patches. And finally, some people got the calf and the old gentleman cornered, and they started to untie the rope from around the old gentleman's waist. He was out of breath, he was hurting and bruised and skint. Finally, he said, "Never mind me, untie the calf." They were worrying about the wrong person. My mother always said, now I had an older brother. He was about 8 years older than I am. His name was Richard. And he was the intelligent one of the family. But he had patience. Mother always said the difference between me and Richard was that if a fence needed to be built, Richard would go in, he'd take measurements, he'd be figuring out how many posts he had to have, how much fence he had to have, where the gates were going to be. And while he was in figuring that, she said Mack would be out gathering up a group of people and they'd have the fence built while he was still trying to figure out how much he was going to need. That's the difference. Now, I do not pray for patience. I would like to have patience. Patience is defined as endurance, self-possession, fortitude, perseverance, and long-suffering. And patience, to my surprise, is used 33 times in the New Testament. And usually it's used as an exhortation. Be patient. He just tells us to be patient. But I am not going to pray for patience. Because he said the trying of your faith will produce patience. If you want to get in real trouble and have a lot of trials and tests and tribulations and problems, just start praying for patience. So I want patience, but I'm not going to pray for it. And don't pray for me to have patience. If you do, I'm going to pray for you to have patience. 1 Thessalonians 5:14 says, we exhort you, brethren. Now listen, this is my job. Warn them that are unruly. You get unruly. How many have been warned by me before? I see you didn't have your hands up at the right time again. Warn them that are unruly. Comfort the feeble-minded. I'm not going to ask for a show of hands. How many have I comforted? Don't put them up. Comfort the feeble-minded. Support the weak. Be patient towards all men. But I would add patience to my list of 3 things that I would like to have. Number 3, I would like to have faith enough to stay with God's plan for my life. Now, there's never been a question about my call to preach the gospel. I'm not ashamed of the gospel. I will preach the gospel anywhere, anytime. I've preached to a handful of people. I think the first service we had in the church we pastored, First Church, 5 people? 5 people. But I've also preached to coliseums full, 15, 20, 30,000 people. But I have never had an illusion that I would be known as a great preacher. I am not a great preacher. I've known some great preachers. But I do strive to preach truth. Amen. I would rather give you truth than to be a great preacher. I'm more of a teacher preacher than anything else. Let me tell you another story. I love to tell stories. An old man, had built a very successful, prosperous business. And as he was getting older, he began to realize that the only relatives he had to leave his business to were 3 young nephews. They all worked for him. But he called the 3 together and he told them, one of you will inherit this business. You will be my successor. You will have to run this business. But I have a problem. The one that solves my problem the best will be the one that inherits this business. He gave each one of the young men a coin. And he tells them, this is a large room that we're in. I want you to go buy something that will fill this room as full as possible. But you cannot spend more than the 1 coin that I gave you. I want you to go out and I want you to come back here at sunset. And we will see who is going to inherit my business, who's going to fill this room the fullest. All day, the young men were out looking for something that they could purchase that would fill the room. As the sun began to set, they all arrived at the uncle's house. And the first youth dragged in a large bale of straw. He untied it, and it made a big pile in the room. The other two boys applauded, complimented, helped him clear the room. The next young man brought in 2 bags of feathers. And when he untied it, it made a big pile. The other 2 boys applauded, cheered. The third young man was standing with his head down, little discouraged, forlorn. And the old man asked him, "What did you buy to fill this room?" The young man with his head down said, "Sir, I gave my coin to a hungry child on the street. But I do have a flint and a candle." And with the flint, he lit the candle, and the light filled every corner of the room. The old man could only think of one thing to say: "Well done, thou good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a few things. Now I will make you ruler over many things." Church, isn't that what life is all about? And isn't that really what Christmas should be about? To come to the end of life and hear the Master say, "Well done." That's my list. Grace enough to be sweet to all people under all conditions. Patience to all people at all times. And number 3, faith enough to stay with God's plan for my life. 2 Timothy 4, I would like to be able to say with the Apostle Paul, "The time of my departure is close at hand. But I've fought a good fight. I've finished my course. I have run my race. I've kept the faith. I want to keep the faith until I draw my last breath."